Corps was in the process of reevaluating a long-term viability of biplane fighters. Advances in engine power, aerodynamics, and metal construction had begun to challenge the established doctrines that favored lightweight, wire-braced designs. Boeing's proposal was designated Model 248 and was funded internally without an initial government contract. This approach allowed Boeing engineers to experiment with the full metal low-wing monoplane layout at a time when such designs were still viewed with caution. The Boeing P-26 was constructed almost entirely out of metal using an aluminum alloy structure covered with stressed skin panels. Despite this modernization, the aircraft retained several features characteristics of earlier fighters. The landing gear was fixed and non-retractable with large aerodynamic fairings installed over the wheels to reduce drag. The cockpit was left open, lacking a canopy or windscreen enclosure. External bracing wires were used to reinforce the wings, a carryover from biplane engineering practices. The aircraft was powered by a Pratt & Whitney R1340 radial engine, producing approximately 600 horsepower. Armament typically consisted of two forward-firing guns, mounted in the fuselage, and synchronized to fire through the propeller arc. The P-26 introduced several aerodynamic principles that would become a standard in later fighter aircraft. The low-wing configuration reduced drag and improved roll response compared to biplane designs. However, the combination of high landing speeds and limited forward visibility made takeoffs and landings more demanding for pilots accustomed to slower aircraft. The absence of flaps further contributed to these handling challenges. As a result, the P-26 required a greater degree of pilot discipline during approach and recovery. The Boeing P-26 entered service with the United States Army Air Corps in 1934. It served primarily as a pursuit aircraft assigned to a continental defense unit. While the P-26 represented a technological advancement, its service life was relatively brief. By the late 1930s, rapid developments in aviation had rendered the aircraft obsolete. Retractable landing gear, enclosed cockpits, and heavier armament became standard in newer designs. Despite this, the P-26 continued to serve in secondary roles and with foreign operators. Export variants were used by air forces in China, the Philippines, and several Latin American nations. Some P-26 aircraft saw limited combat use during the early stages of the Second World War, most notable in the defense of the Philippines during 1941. Several variants of the P-26 were produced, including the P-26A, the P-26B, and the P-26C. Differences between variants were generally minor and included engine upgrades, fuel system improvements, and minor structural reinforcements. The overall performance characteristics remained largely unchanged across all versions. Within War Thunder, the Boeing P-26 appears as an early-tier United States fighter aircraft. Its in-game performance closely reflects its historical limitations. The aircraft is characterized by moderate speed, light armament, and limited survivability. Due to its fixed landing gear and exposed cockpit, the P-26 performs best when flown conservatively and at lower altitudes. It serves primarily as an introduction to early monoplane flight mechanics within the technology tree. represents a moment where a tradition and innovation briefly coexisted.